Welcome back, everybody, to another week of Sunday School here at the Lighthouse Church of the Nazarene in Moravia, Iowa, where we are going through the book of John. We're going to start John chapter 20 today. Now, so what has happened? Jesus has been crucified. He's been laid in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, because it says they would make his grave with the rich. And then we had a Sabbath day where no one would have done any work. No one would have done any traveling. And now we come to the first day of the week. And let's just start in here. John chapter 20, verse 1. Now, the first day of the week. We know that Jesus arose on a Sunday. It starts right here. John says, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene is going to the tomb. The debate is on what day Jesus died on. Now, the traditional view is that Jesus was crucified on a Friday, which we celebrate as Good Friday, and then arose on Sunday. That's the traditional view. But if you go to Matthew chapter 12, verse 40, Jesus said something very interesting. Jesus said, "For as the prophet Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so also will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." So some people think, because of that saying, that Jesus actually died on a Thursday. Because after all, if he died on a Friday, you'd have Friday night, Saturday night, rose Sunday morning. You couldn't get 3 days and 3 nights. But there's smart people on both sides of that debate. But there is a debate on to what day Jesus died. So we're in John chapter 20, verse 1. Now the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb early. So John tells us that Mary Magdalene went. But we actually know that Mary wasn't alone, because all Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the 3 synoptic gospels, they also say that there was other women with Mary. In fact, Mark actually names them as Salome and Mary, the mother of James the Less. So we know it wasn't just Mary going to the tomb alone. There was other women with her. And actually, if you go down to verse 2 here, where Mary Magdalene tells the disciples, they have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him. If she had been by herself, I think she would have said, I. So she says, hey, we don't know where they laid him. So Mary confirms that there was other women with her. So on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb early while it was still dark. The word that they use for early here, it's very early. It's actually the word that is used for the 4th watch of the night, between the hours of 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. So now we also have to ask ourselves this. Jesus is in the tomb. Why are they even going to the tomb? Well, luckily the Gospel of Mark tells us. If you go to Mark chapter 16, verse 1, it says that the women were planning to anoint him. And in fact, as they were walking there, they were having a discussion with themselves like, who are we going to get to roll the stone away? So if we take all the Gospels together, we can get the whole story. So verse 1, now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb early while it was still dark and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So what happened to the stone? This stone, it would have weighed 1 to 2 tons, and it would have been in a groove. So it would have rolled downhill to seal the tomb, and then it would have had to been rolled uphill to open the tomb. So the stone's been rolled away. They find it rolled away. What happened to it? Well, if we go to the book of Matthew, Matthew actually gives us the greatest amount of detail concerning what happened. If you go to Matthew chapter 27, the Jews are worried that somebody's going to steal the body of Jesus, because they said, hey, that deceiver, they called him a deceiver. They said that deceiver said that he would rise on the 3rd day. So we think that the disciples are going to come and take away the body. And you know what Pilate says? He says, hey, make it secure as you know how. So they sealed the tomb and set a guard. Now, a Roman seal over a tomb, they would have taken clay and packed it on each side and then stretched a rope across it and put the Roman insignias on that clay. If you've ever worked in anything where you have loadout, you put seals on stuff so that when the people receive the freight, they know that, hey, this hasn't been broken. They would seal the tomb with clay so that you would know, hey, nobody's tampered with this because the clay's not been broken. So the tomb was sealed, plus there was a guard set in front of it. But the book of Matthew tells us, chapter 28, right at the beginning, that there was a great earthquake, and an angel of the Lord came down, rolled the stone out of the way, and it says the guards fell like dead men. So the guards, they were there. They saw everything. They had to go change their underwear, I bet. Verse 2. So then she ran and came to Simon Peter and to the other disciples. whom Jesus loved, and said to them, they have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him. Now, I wonder who Mary thinks they are. Like, who would have actually stolen? The Jews? The Jews wouldn't have stolen Jesus, because then when the disciples come and say, hey, he arose, they'd say, no, we've got the body. So the Jews wouldn't have stolen the body. The disciples, they wouldn't have stolen the body. The Romans, grave robbers, I don't know who Mary would be referring to right here. Let's see, verse 3. Peter therefore went out, and the other disciple, that would be John, we believe, and were going to the tomb. So they both ran together, and the other disciple outran Peter and came to the tomb first. Notice John is humble enough in his book to not refer to himself by name. He usually refers to himself as the one who Jesus loved. But he's not humble enough to not point out that he was able to outrun Peter and get to the tomb first. But this makes sense. We believe that John is the youngest of all the disciples. He's younger, more nimble. Why do we think he's young? Well, because he lives so much older than everybody else, even though he was the one to die a natural death. And every time that he gets referred to next to his brother, even though John was the more important disciple, they're always referred to as James and John, the son of Zebedee. So we believe that John was the younger brother of James. So they both ran together. John outruns Peter, gets to the tomb first, and I'm in verse 5 now. And he, stooping down and looking in, saw the linen clothes lying there, yet he did not go in. Notice John had to stoop down. The tomb entrance, it was probably 3 feet by 2 feet, so it wasn't like you could just walk into the tomb. You had to stoop down to look in. Verse 6, then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb, and he saw the linen clothes lying there. Is not Peter always the impulsive one? Peter's, the one that, not you, Lord, nothing will happen to you. When they come to arrest him, Peter's the one that pulls out the sword and strikes the servant of the high priest and cuts his ear off. Peter was the one that said, hey, it's good for us to be here. Let's make 3 tabernacles. Peter's always the impulsive one. Notice that John and Mary, they didn't go into the tomb. They didn't want anything. They were like, whoa, this is strange. But what did Peter do? Peter went right into that tomb. One other thing that I want to mention here on Peter. Notice it seems Peter has moved on from denying the Lord. What happened to Peter the last time we read about Peter? He denied Jesus after the rooster crowed 3 times. We know that Jesus looked at Peter and Peter went out and wept bitterly. Notice that Peter, it seems, has been able to move on from that already. As a Christian and in life, you got to be able to move on. Jesus said, no one putting his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of heaven. Look, we're going to make mistakes. We got to move on from them. Guess what? Other people are going to let us down. We have to forget them and move on. We can't hold a grudge. So notice Peter has moved on, it appears, from denying Jesus. Let's keep going here. Verse 7. All right, I'll start in verse 6. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb, and he saw the linen clothes lying there, and the handkerchief that had been around his head, not lying with the linen clothes, but folded together in a place by itself. Why is John pointing all this out about the linen clothes? We know when they anointed Jesus' body, just right in the previous chapter, says they anointed him with strips of linen and covered him with spices. They had 100 pounds of myrrh and aloe. Think like a mummy. That's what they did. They put strips of linen and then they would coat him with all this aloe and spices so that it would actually all be kind of a solid thing. What John is pointing out here is, hey, the grave clothes, they hadn't been touched. It was if the body was still there, but the body of Jesus had just vaporized through them. They were neat and orderly. No one had touched them. If somebody had stolen the body of Jesus, the linen clothes, they would have been stripped off and thrown away. They would have been laying in upheaval. No, John's saying it was like he was there still, but he wasn't. If you go back to John chapter 11, when Jesus raises Lazarus out of the tomb after he'd been there for 4 days, it says that they had to say, loose him and let him go. He came out with his grave cloths on and they had to get him all off. No, Jesus, his body just vaporized right through them. That's what it's saying right here. When it says the linen clothes were just there and the handkerchief that had been around his head, it wasn't with the linen clothes. It was right where his head was supposed to be. This is proof that Jesus' body wasn't stolen right here. All right, let's keep going here. Verse 8. Then the other disciple who came to the tomb first, he went in also, and he saw and believed. So after Peter went into the tomb, then John had went into the tomb. For as yet they did not know the scripture that he must rise again from the dead. Then the disciples went away again to their own homes. One last thing I want to point out about the linen cloths that John, Peter, and Mary Magdalene all saw just laying there. Some people believe that we actually have the burial cloth of Jesus, and it's called the Shroud of Turin. Look it up. It's very interesting. The Shroud of Turin, it's a burial cloth that bears the image of a crucified man on it, and this crucified man, he had long hair, a beard, a ponytail. You can see the picture. He was roughly 5'11", 175 pounds. And just recently, it was confirmed to be that, yeah, this is 2,000 years old. So some people believe that we actually have the burial cloth of Jesus, and it's called the Shroud of Turin. Whether it is or not, I don't know. But some people are just matter of fact, think that we still have it here. So let's go to verse 11 here. But Mary stood outside the tomb, weeping. And as she wept, she stooped down and looked at the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting, one at the head and the other at the feet, at the place where Jesus' body had lain. Now, different gospels actually have different accounts here. Notice John has two angels. Luke, he also has two angels at the tomb. Matthew and Mark, they each only have one angel. But do you know what this tells us? Some people say, see, the Bible, it doesn't agree, it's not right. No, this actually tells us that the writers of the Gospels, they didn't collaborate with each other and say, okay, we're going to say this, and this is our story, and we got to stick to it. No, they actually wrote their own accounts of what they believe to be there. And this is actually greater evidence that the Bible is true, believe it or not. Because if you have 10 people in a crowd, and they all watch the same event, and then you go and interview them an hour later, you'll get 10 similar accounts of that. But I guarantee you won't get 10 exact same accounts of just what happened. So the fact that there's minor differences in between the Gospels does not mean that the Bible's not true. It actually gives greater evidence that it is true. Let's see here. Verse 13. Then the angel said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." I find it intriguing how Mary isn't even startled that she's getting to talk to angels. The angels go, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" If that had been me, I'm like, this is really cool. This is really strange. What is going on? Mary, she's so distraught over losing Jesus that she's not even intrigued that the angels are talking to her. Let's see what she says. She said, "Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." So angels are talking to Mary. She's so distraught over losing Jesus, she doesn't even seem bothered by it. Verse 14, now when she had said this, she turned around, and she saw Jesus standing there. But she did not know that it was Jesus. Now, why did Mary not recognize Jesus? Well, something had changed. Jesus now had a resurrected body. In fact, if you go to Mark chapter 16, it says that Jesus appeared in another form. And if you go to Luke chapter 24, he's on the road to Emmaus, and the people don't recognize him as Jesus. And in fact, even in our next chapter, he's going to appear to his disciples. And it's going to say that they think it's Jesus, but no one wants to ask him, "Who are you?" So Jesus looked different in his resurrected form than he looked while he was on the earth. It gets us thinking, what will our bodies look like throughout all of eternity? Will we look the exact same as we do now? Well, the Bible does give us some evidence. It's in 1 John 3:2. It says that when he is revealed, we shall be like him. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, it says, "Behold, we shall be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye." And in Philippians chapter 3, the Bible tells us that God will transform our lowly bodies into his glorious bodies, according to the power which he is able to subdue even all things to himself. So you and I, we're going to have resurrected, glorified bodies. What is that going to be like? Well, we can kind of look at what Jesus' resurrected body is like. We know that he could eat. He ate fish with his disciples. So we know that he had a body that he could consume food and digest. But guess what he could also do? He could also walk through walls at any time, because we'll probably get to that next week, where it says the disciples are in a room with a locked door, and what does Jesus do? Walks right through the door or the wall and comes right in and stands in the midst of them. So we know that Jesus can eat food. We know that he can walk through walls. But get this. It tells us that he also has the scars on his hands, because he's going to tell Thomas, "Hey, put your fingers here and look at my hands. Put your hand here and look into my side." So Jesus still had his scars from when he was on the earth, but he did have a glorified, resurrected body. So, verse 15, Jesus said to her, "Woman, Why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking? She, supposing him to be the gardener, said to him, Sir, if you had carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned around and said to him, Rabboni. I always say rabbi here, which is to say teacher. Notice Mary didn't recognize Jesus' voice either. His voice had changed. But then she recognized Jesus, and she says teacher, and she's happy that she sees him here. Tell you what, let's just stop right there for the week. We'll pick up right again next week at verse 17. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you the same time, same place next week. Bye.